So today we're going to be making a coil pot, and you can see I have the beginnings here. I have my slab already rolled out, and I have rolled that so it's thicker than 1/4 of an inch. It's just over 1/4 of an inch, probably about 3/8. Still want it thinner than 1/2 an inch, but if you get it too skinny, it will be really fragile as you stack more weight on there, and also it can cause a little bit of cracking across the surface of the bottom if there's too much weight on the sides for the thickness of the bottom. So first I am going to cut this down a little bit. I think I'm going to make an oval. I am going to be creating a bust of my friend's kitty named Moo. So I'm going to use her head as my inspiration for this coil pot. So I think for her neck I'm going to make it kind of like the opening of a collar, an oval shape. So I'll just go ahead and freehand that. If you're not comfortable freehanding it, you can always print out a shape on the computer and trace it with a piece of paper. So I draw that on there first, so I make sure I get that nice and even where I want it. That's why if you make any mistakes, you can just kind of blend them out with your finger before you start cutting. So just go ahead and take my needle tool, lean into the line there, push all the way through. Now when we're making the coil pot, we're going to need to be very aware of the stages of dryness. So probably make the coil pot in at least 3 stages. The bottom and the middle and the top, you won't want to do all in the same sitting because we're stacking a lot of weight on the side here. We're also going to be manipulating the shape somewhat. And if you were to try to stack a whole bunch of coils on all at once while the clay was still very wet and flexible, that can cause your shape to sag or even collapse if it's very wet. Okay, so we've got our nice oval shape here, our ellipse. I am going to go ahead and put that to the side for a moment. And I've got 4 slugs of clay here, about the size of hot dogs. You want to make sure this clay isn't too dry because you're going to be manipulating it a lot as we roll coils by hand, and that can cause your clay to dry out. So if it does feel like your clay is getting dry, it could be that you've been rolling on it too long. You may need to spray it with some water. Go ahead and spritz mine a little. Okay. Keep your ellipse moist while it's sitting out. So we're going to be slipping coils to that. So go ahead and elongate your pieces of clay. And the trick to making nice round coils is you want to make sure that when you're rolling with your hands, you're rolling all the way forward and all the way back. So from the tip of your fingers to the base of your wrist here. You go all the way forward and all the way back. Some people, especially when they've got a small working space, they try to rock back and forth like this, kind of like when you're a little kid doing Play-Doh. But what can happen is that does not cause pressure around the entire shape of the clay, and so your piece will actually flatten out. It'll just be almost impossible to roll and stretch out. So start with your hands in the middle, work them out towards the side. And you don't need to push very hard with your hands, just enough to get the clay to stretch out a little bit, because the motion of the clay on the table, if they break, that's fine. Just put it aside. You'll make more coils. The motion of the clay on the table is what's going to stretch these out. So press just enough that you get it to stretch out, and you'll start to see it elongate. And we're not worried about how long these are going to be because we're going to keep attaching to each other to end to end as we layer them on our coil pot. But we want to make sure that they are pretty uniform thickness. Lose it a little bit there. Okay. So even this is still a little too thick. You want it under 1/2 an inch, but you don't want them to be too super skinny like spaghetti, because then they're really fragile and they can be, you have to make a lot of them in order to build up your volume. So I probably do this about the same thickness as I made the base of the pot here. To go a little skinnier, they'll be about 3/8 in diameter. Okay. So you don't want to try to make all of your coils for the entire pot in one sitting, but I usually like to have a few going. So once I start slipping them together, I'm not losing my momentum by having to roll a coil every time. I'm going all the way forward, all the way back, all the way forward, all the way back. If your coil flattens out, it's because you're rocking back and forth. It is the main thing that I correct students on when we're working together in the classroom. I come over and I see my poor student is there struggling with a piece that's flat. If it does get flat, you can just pick it up and kind of work out the angle just with your fingers, pinch it back in so it's roughly circular, and then roll all the way forward and all the way back. So they don't need to be perfect and have them look like a machine made them. Okay, so now we're going to take our base. We're going to slip and score, and your coils want to go on top of the outside of your base here. You don't want to start by slipping them onto the side of the base. And that is because you want your base to be the nice strong foundation for your piece, and if they're just attached to the sides, it's not going to really give it much reinforcement. So I'm slipping the outside, taking a coil. Go ahead and slip the length of the coil. Get a good coating on there. This is where I like to use my serrated tool or a comb or a fork, because you're going to do a lot of scoring. So just go ahead, score into the base there, and score across the top of your coil. And then you're going to bring these two scored surfaces together. Okay, when you're laying the coil on there, go ahead and start with one end, press it down where you're going to begin, and then hold the coil up, gently pressing with two fingers on each side of the coil, and let that rotate around. Keep it nice and even on the base of your clay. Okay. That will create a nice seal for your coil. When you get to the end, you can go ahead and take your needle tool and cut off just enough to bring those two edges together. Go ahead and blend those together. So don't worry about polishing or smoothing for now. We're going to put about 3 or 4 stacks on there for our base. So right now I'm making the neck of my friend's kitty. I'm going to take some more slip. Go ahead and slip on the next coil. Once again, just score on the top where you're going to attach your next coil. Okay. So if you have some short coils, you can just go ahead and slip them end to end when you get to the end of a coil. going to start in roughly the same area where I started with the previous coil. Press down and seal those two coils together with gentle presses. Get a little closer. You can see I'm pressing those coils so they're nice and level with each other and it's not swimming all over the base of the previous coil there. So we want to fill in with another piece of coil. Okay, so I won't need all of this. I'll just go ahead and slip all of there because I'm going to use it eventually. Score once again. Start at the end where your previous coil ran out. Okay. Once again, take your needle tool, cut that off there and blend those two edges together. If you were trying to take one long coil and just coil it as like one long snake, that can cause one end to go up a little higher since you're not ending the coils with each other on the same level. So it can make some strange looking irregularities. Okay. So also, since we're making the head of a cat that's going to tilt out as it comes up towards her cheeks, I'm going to start angling my coils so that they create more of a conical shape as we're going up. So take your slip and put it slightly on the outside of the previous coil. And there's a lot of slipping and scoring. But changing directions can feel kind of challenging to people, so I want to make sure you see what I'm doing. So go ahead and score slightly on the outside. You can see it's not quite completely centered on the top there. I'm coming slightly to the outside and scoring. Okay. So I start once again with my coil, but I'm going to slip it at a slight angle like this. So I'm holding my fingers away from the inside of the pot. And I'm slipping and pressing that coil so it's just laying on the outside there. And you can adjust the angle after you put it on, but you just kind of want to get it to a point where it's attached at the slight outside angle so the clay knows what it's doing. You don't have to roughneck it too much by pulling on it. Okay, so we'll take what we've got left over. I think that'll go all the way. Okay, once again. So I'm pinching, pressing down, and also angling my hands outward a little bit. This is a good project to do because you learn a lot about the subtle adjustments that you can do with your fingers and how to make your clay even. Okay, so at this point I kind of take a look at my coils and see if they need to be evened out a little bit. I've done this several times, so mine tend to look really even, but sometimes beginning students, they have a lot of things like this, things are like this, dip down like that. While the clay is still moist, just go ahead and press in pieces to get them more or less level with each other on the facade of the pot there. And if you have any cracks like that, you can take your slip, a little clay, and just blend them in. Okay, so we're doing a lot of building with this project. And this is what's called the additive method of clay. So sometimes in making a pot, you have a big piece of clay. You're just kind of scraping away at it. You're creating volume by pulling space out of the clay. But in this way, we're creating space by adding shapes and adding clay to each other to create that volume. Okay, so now at this point I have 5 coils slipped on each other in a stack, and that's about as far as I want to go for the first session. So these pots are going to be at least 6 inches high, but I believe I said no taller than 9 inches because transporting these can be a little dicey if they get overly large. So try to pick a subject that will fit into a more compact area instead of trying to go for a large fluted and delicate shape. That's why I wanted to do the head of my friend's kitty, because it's kind of a good compact shape. Okay, so from here we're up to about 2.5 inches already. So you do make a lot of progress. Even though this seems like a very slow process, you actually build up height and volume very quickly. We've got the nice start of an angle going here. I'm going to angle this top coil out just a little bit more, just because this kitty has really fat cheeks. So I'm going to begin to build up the volume of her cheeks. And when I do this design, I'm not going to stick to just a straightforward coil design. I'm going to show you guys in the next session how to design with coils that will also get you volume, but also use the design inherent in using coils to kind of create a nice visual flow and kind of a lively design. So coils aren't just stacked up like rows of corn on a corn cob. Okay, so until next time, thank you very much.